In this interview, we talk about the recent massacres of Alawites and Christians in Syria, which have claimed over 1,000 lives. I am joined by Johannes De Jong, director of Sallux, with experience on Syria. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. It's nice to talk with the people of Sweden. Great country, visited many times. So I know that these issues that play out in Syria impact your country a lot. And so I'm very happy to have this conversation.
So can you explain what is happening in Syria?
Yeah, well, what is happening, and nobody knows for sure. So let me first go to the first point that you actually made. So I've been working with movements from mainly northeast Syria for over 10 years now, since 2014, since the Battle of Kobane, when ISIS attacked Kobane. And I've been working with the Syrian Christians of northeast Syria, with the Kurds of northeast Syria. Obviously, after the fall of the Assad regime, we expanded our contacts to other regions like the Druze, Southern Operation Room area, and also the Alawites. So, for example, we will have a press conference and meeting with the members of parliament in the Dutch parliament tomorrow with these representatives of these groups. So our function has been to build bridges between the people on the ground there and policymakers here in Europe, also in the US. So what we see happening now is a logical outcome of European policy over the last 10 years. So the European policy over the last 10 years has been to support Turkey, to support Iran, and as a consequence, we supported extremism in Syria. We refused to give full support to northeast Syria, which is the non-extremist part of the country, already for 10 years. I mean, we're talking the people who fought ISIS for us, also for themselves, but also for us. We don't help them when Turkey is bombing them, which is happening every day. And so then we are surprised about what's happening in the Alawite coast, which is horrible. What we do know is that initially it seems like, at least a lot of people talking about, is that the Iranian operatives encouraged some Alawites to attack units of the HTS interim government in Damascus. That unleashed a response that went completely horrible, absolutely out of line, totally massacres happened. And so that is absolutely horrible what happened. We do not know exactly how many Christians have been the target. And I want to put some caution there because there is many conflicting reports on this. And even with our network, we cannot get complete clarity. I'm in touch also with leaders of other NGOs, Western NGOs, some people in Syria, but nobody exactly knows what's happening. In that regard, it seems that some Christians have become kind of the victims in the process, but mostly not. And also that some of the numbers have been hyped up by those Christians in Syria and outside who are pro-Assad and who still want Assad to come back, which is delusional in my opinion, because that is really beyond any realistic reality now. Moreover, nobody should want it. And so the thing is that we do know for sure that, well, at least 1,000 people among the Alawite community have been murdered in terms of civilians. I mean, I'm not talking about combatants, but it could also be more, but we don't know. Nobody knows for sure. People, even of the UN, are trying to establish the facts, which is extremely difficult because we're talking about the area of Syria that was even in the last 10 years, the most difficult to reach for Western journalists. And also because that was the Alawite community was totally under control of Assad. Obviously, many Alawites were not pro-Assad, but they are being painted as such because Assad family came from that community and a number of their main operatives as well. But it doesn't mean that all Alawites are on the side of Assad. So we see the ethnic tensions that were already there for many, many years, many decades, well, for 100 years, blowing up. And the main perpetrators of these massacres of the last week seem to be the extremist proxies of Turkey, of the so-called Syrian National Army, SNA, and the foreign fighters in the HTS. So the HTS has a lot of Syrians, but also a lot of people from Central Asia, for example, from Afghanistan or Uzbekistan and so on. And they seem to have been the main perpetrators as well as together with these Turkish proxies of these massacres, of these terrible human rights violations.
How do you assess how EU have handled this, their response? What are your views on that? The EU is said to have invited the previous leader of al-Qaeda, but also condemned what they call the Assad forces?
Well, it's correct that they condemned the Assad forces, but they should have immediately also said that the HTS is responsible to keep the situation under control, which they clearly were not able to. I doubt that Damascus wanted these massacres because it makes them look very bad. So I highly doubt that they wanted this, but it is a sign that they have no control over their own forces, and they for sure have no control over the Turkish proxies that have become such committers of these massacres. But we should remember this. Right after the fall of the Assad regime, the Turkish proxies already drove away 100,000 people from north of Aleppo. They drove them away to northeast Syria. And that is because these people were Kurds. So we're dealing with a much bigger problem than what happened last week. And much bigger problem than just a statement of the EU that went a bit wrong, clearly. We should look to the long-term European policy here that is spilling over now. And the long-term policy of the EU when it comes to Syria has been to support and appease Turkey and to support and appease Iran. And the consequence of these policies has been that the extremism has exploded, because these are both regimes that support and fund and further and let grow extremism. And this extremism is now, well, basically coming back to haunt us. And so Turkey supported ISIS, Turkey supported al-Qaeda, Turkey supported these terrible militias that are attacking northeast Syria now, at this moment, and have been committing these horrible crimes in the Alawite coastal areas. And if we want to change this, if we want to have a different outcome, if we don't want the extremism in Syria again to explode, the first and foremost thing that needs to happen is to stop the Turkish extremism and, the Turkish aggression in Syria. If we don't do that, if we don't stop Turkey, this will be coming back again and again until half of the population is fleeing to Europe. Because we still need to remember that, like, for example, in northeast Syria is 5 million people. In the Alawite coast is 2 million to 2.5 million people. So we're already talking about 7.5 million people. If Turkey gets its way, 7.5 million people will be driven out of Syria, first of all, subjugated as well, and we will see ISIS on the run. Because what happened last week also demonstrates that HTS is not capable to keep ISIS under control. We need the Syrian Democratic Forces of northeast Syria. to keep ISIS under control. If we don't do that, we will have, as Europe, a massive problem, because we do not want, I presume, we do not want ISIS to commit a new wave of attacks in Europe. So the problem is also that we don't understand the bigger picture. We don't understand the realities on the ground. But we also don't understand that we should look beyond this little slips of the pen of the EU, but rather to look to the whole policy of the EU of the last 12 years. And then we see that this is part of a pattern of support for extremism. And we really shouldn't do that. We should support those people in Syria who are non-extremists, who fight against the extremism, who put together an interim regional government of Kurds and Arabs and Syrians, and put men and women in equal place in that system in northeast Syria. That is the kind of Syria we should want to see. That's the kind of Syria that Europeans would like to see, and that we are not supporting. And we are not supporting is because Turkey doesn't want us to support that, which is insane, because that would be the answer against the extremism that ultimately also hurts us. Much of the refugee stream could have been prevented if we would not have supported Turkey, if we would not have supported Iran. Basically, the European foreign policy is one of the main causes of the refugee stream from Syria to Europe.
And given this ongoing violence, what are the prospects of the survival of Syria's Alawites and Christian communities in the long term?
I think I find this very hard to say. A lot will depend on what we do as Europe. Because now the saying is we should, as Europe, take our own responsibility for what is happening around us. I agree. Let's do that. Let's not delegate what is happening in Syria to extremist regimes like Turkey. Let's take responsibility. France has already taken some steps in the right direction. I must say that. France has already taken some steps in the right direction. I think we should basically force the HTS to continue this process of real inclusion of the various parts of Syria in a real joint process towards more decentralized but also more democratic Syria. Now, that will not happen overnight, but it is possible, I think, step by step, if we take really responsibility. If we do not outsource that responsibility to the US, if we as Europeans take the responsibility, it is our interest that things there do not explode. And we are the ones, aside from the Syrians themselves, obviously, who get hurt the most. I mean, if you compare it with the US. So the thing is that we should start by really saying no to Turkey, stop Turkish extremism. We should demand that HTS dismantles the non-Syrian elements in the HTS. We should give full support to the Syrian Democratic Forces and autonomous administration in Northeast Syria. We should also support those elements among the Alawites who want to work beyond the Assad regime. We should also include in that process the Southern Operation Room and the Druze of Suwaida in the south. And if we do that, we have a good opportunity to basically keep Syria whole in the sense of the communities. If we don't do that, things could become quite chaotic. But I think that what happened last week already woke up some people, and we saw in the agreement that has now been struck, or better, a framework to come to an agreement, being struck between SDF and HTS, between Yolani and Maslum Abdi, which is not more than a framework to get to an agreement, all right? That process is kind of already happening. because that happened because France and the US put pressure on the HTS in Damascus to sign that agreement, which they first refused and now they did. So the massacre, what happened in the Alawite coast, has been a massive wake-up call, and you see some changes already in the policy in the right direction. What should happen is that continues, and that again, the main thing that we should now do, because Iran is now out of Syria, mainly. They still have some operatives there, but it's not a massive force anymore. Now it's really high time to set a stop on the Turkish aggression. Turkey is still bombing the people of northeast Syria. Turkey is still attacking civilians in northeast Syria. So it's not in our news, and that's outrageous. And we should really set a stop to that, give the SDF anti-aircraft equipment as a deterrent against Turkish aggression, and it mainly will be over. So there is a way to solve this if we want it. If we stay stuck in, we need Turkey, we refuse to acknowledge that what Turkey is doing is also an undermining for European security. I understand that some people say we need Turkey against Russia, but Turkey itself is also undermining European security in a massive way. So we should say no to both, basically, and should not outsource any of our security to an extremist regime. The moment Turkey changes back to a more normal government, of course, we can work with that. The problem is the current government of Turkey. It's not the Turkish people. But the point is that we should not support extremists. And as long as we keep doing that, we get these results. And we should really stop with that.
Thank you very much, Johannes De Jong, Director of Sallux with experience on Syria.
Well, thank you for having me, and have a great day.
And thank you for watching Riks Europe.